It looks like it's preparing to live stream.
I think we're live streaming. I get the little note. So it is 9:33, and I'm going to call the Stokes Trustee Board meeting to order per our agenda this morning. We have a packed agenda, so let's get right into it. If you don't have your live binder open, I would advise you to do that now. We'll move to our first agenda item, and that is to review and approve the minutes. So I'll give trustees a little time to check that out, and I will receive a motion for acceptance of and approval of the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the September 2021 minutes of the Stokes Board.
Thank you, Amy. We have a motion.
A second.
Janice has offered a second. Any comments on the motion? All right, let's do, I'm going to roll call so that everybody gets in verbally. We have a motion to accept and approve the minutes. Janice, what say
Aye.
you?
Aye.
Hoyt?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Adina?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Crystal?
Aye.
Carlos?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So the ayes have it. We have accepted and approved our minutes from September. Thank you for that. All right, well, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. And we are a little bit early, so can you call in Tiana?
They are actually in the waiting room. So
Okay, perfect.
It moved them.
So our agenda item today is to hear on our financial audit.
Good morning, Tiana.
Hey, good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You have someone joining you from SB & Company today, looks like.
Yes, I do. I am one of the engagement seniors.
Okay. Well, we are ready for your presentation.
Oh, okay, great. So good morning, everyone. I realize I'm sitting in front of a window that's not providing the best lighting. But I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
We can.
So for those of you that I've not had an opportunity to meet, my name is Tiana Nguyen. I serve as the engagement partner for the June 30, 2021 audit. Thanks so much for making time for us today. I know you guys have lots to cover on your agenda, so I will try not to belabor. If you feel as though I'm going too fast or you have a question, please let me know. I did have the opportunity to meet with the Finance Committee on Thursday to walk through these materials at great length. So again, if there's anything that you need additional information, just please let me know. SB & Company was engaged to complete an audit for the June 30, 2021 fiscal year. Due to your federal funding, so funding that exceeded $750,000. We also completed an audit in accordance with uniform grant guidance, just due to the nature of your federal funding. We were also engaged to prepare the 2020 Form 990 and 990T. We'll be working with management to get those finalized, and we will present more than likely at your next meeting. Included in the financial statements is a required schedule from the Public Charter School Board, which is a schedule of vendors in excess of $25,000. While that is a required schedule in order to be in conformity with your charter agreement, we do not provide any type of assurance on that schedule. We have worked with management to understand how the schedule was created. We've performed some high-level procedures to get comfortable, but just want you to be aware that it is an unaudited schedule. One of the new deliverables for this year was the audit of the employee benefit plan. So it's the defined contribution plan that includes the employer contributions. There was a trigger for an audit for 2020. As the school is growing, your number of employees is increasing. And as a result, because you had more than 100 employees as of 1/1/2020, that plan did require an audit in accordance with ERISA. So it's something that's done under the Department of Labor. Historically, we've prepared the Form 5500s for both of your defined contribution plans. Both of those have also been completed and filed. And just reminder, we are available for year-round consultation, and we encourage all of our clients just to take advantage of that. From a summary of results perspective, we are planning to issue clean, unmodified opinions on the financial statements, and that will also include a report over your internal control for financial reporting, as well as compliance with major grants, certain laws and regulations. From the benefit plan perspective, we are planning to issue an unmodified limited scope audit as allowed by the Department of Labor on that plan. We didn't discover or, were we made aware of any instances of fraud during the year. We received full cooperation from everyone on staff, assisting us with getting through quite a bit of deliverables, if you can imagine. And then again, we didn't discover any material weaknesses in the internal control environment, but we do have some recommendations and observations related to the employee benefit plan, which we'll go over shortly. Here is just a depiction of our audit approach. I think the important thing here is just to let you know that we execute what's called a risk-based approach. We spend time understanding the organization, its risk. We look at your internal control environment, how you mitigate risk, and we use that information to really drive where we spend our time during the audit. From an area of audit emphasis perspective, you can see the significant accounting principles related around revenue recognition, ensuring the accuracy of your net asset restrictions, and spending some time looking at the allocation of functional expenses. Some of the key areas centered around cash and cash reconciliations, your disbursement process, being able to understand, going with that revenue recognition, also the collectability of your receivables, making sure that all the liabilities of the organization have been included in the financial statements as of June 30. We do spend time, looking at your travel and entertainment or different purchases that are done on your credit cards. We look at related party transactions, and then of course, with your debt, being able to, look at the accounting, making sure the disclosures are reasonable, and then looking at your debt covenants as it relates to your agreements with the bank. We use a 5-step model. It's called a COSO model, but we use this model to assess the internal control environment. And here we spend time, understanding the overall control environment, the tone at the top, the policies and practices of the organization. We look to see how you assess risk, but also how you respond to risk as a result of your monitoring procedures that are in place. We look at how information is communicated, not only just inside the organization, but externally as well. And then from there, we looked at that environment and we begin to drill down to look at some of the individual control activities. Some of those control activities, picking up here on page 7, would be the evaluation of, certain key processes and the functions of those underlying processes. So whether, we've talked about the reconciliations and the cash management, estimation, so like the collectability or your depreciation policies. We put a great emphasis on financial reporting and how the books are closed. If you can recall, I mentioned that opinion that we actually give on the internal control environment over reporting. So we look to see, how are the books closed? What types of reports are prepared, and how was the information verified and reviewed for accuracy internally? And all of that really allows us to assess the accuracy even of the financial information that's provided to governance, which allows you to make decisions, as well as information that's then passed on to the public or the charter school board, et cetera. So if you can imagine, that's a very strong function for us. We look at your expense process, how things are initiated and authorized and ultimately dispersed. The payroll process. Can't explain enough on the importance of the revenue function, both from a billing, a cash receipts, and cutoff. Not a lot of activity, but looking at your fixed asset process, how you acquire assets, and also how you dispose of them, and the useful life that you assign to assets that are expected to have a life greater than 1 year. And you'll see in all of these instances, these control areas, we have deemed the internal control environment to be effective. We did have one prior year recommendation around the credit card process, and just the review and some of the what I would kind of maybe call housekeeping over this process. This is something that is for 2021 in process. We'll actually be meeting with a new personnel that has been onboarded at the school to give some tips and recommendations on just how to strengthen the internal control environment over credit cards, as well as the overall disbursement process. The next 2 pages are the financial statement results. I won't spend a lot of time here, especially just given the fact that I know at this point it's November. This information, is from June, but from the overall results, lots of increases as it relates to your from your revenues, both from just increases in per pupil enrollment, both at your original campus as well as East End. There were also, increases related to the federal funding. There was lots of new funding that was available under the CARES Act and just overall result of the pandemic. So the school did take advantage of that. One of the things that's also coming through the financial statements this year that's contributing to that strong change in that position is the forgiveness of the PPP loan. So if you can remember, this time last year, there was a liability that had been recorded on the financial statements. And as a result of working with the bank and the information submitted to them, that loan was forgiven during this year, 21, and that revenue is in the current year. The next slide is just something that we use when we're just trying to, be able to be comfortable with the results and understanding the overall financial health of the organization. So, we look at the revenues and expenses per pupil, even looking at the financing sources per pupil. And, we talked before about that allocation of the expenses and that difference between the program expenses and the, if you want to call it G&A or overhead. Looking at your cash position, fairly strong cash position with 68 days on hand. Included within the financial statements, there is a footnote that talks about your liquidity ratio and the fact that your minimum requirement is 45 days. So you can see, for 21, you are in excess of that. Here, just giving you a summary of the single audit. There was, the major program was SOAR. There were kind of 2 components of SOAR that came in during the year, giving us a 28% coverage of your total federal awards. The minimum coverage requirement is 20%. So again, in both instances, we are planning to issue unmodified opinions over reporting and compliance, as well as the requirements for major programs, and there are no reportable findings. There will be a new accounting pronouncement effective in 2023 related to how it is that leases, long-term leases, are recorded. Currently, they're just a disclosure in your financial statements, but on a go-forward basis, you'll be required to record an asset and corresponding liability for the total value of your leases in excess of 1 year. We will continue to work with management throughout the implementation of this standard. This is a standard that was actually probably supposed to be implemented either in 20 or 21, but right at the onset of the pandemic, a great amount of the lease standards or the new standards were postponed just to give organizations time to deal with other things rather than having to deal with accounting. The next piece here is just the results of the employee benefit plan. Our overall approach and methodology is the same. We still use that risk-based model to assess the internal control environment. You'll see here the primary principle that we look at for estimate and judgment is going to be the market valuation of the investments. But some of the principal areas of audit emphasis, it's going to be your contributions and disbursements, really understanding the regulatory compliance, how it is that census data is maintained and reviewed, how you interact with your third-party service providers, et cetera. Here, really coming into the 2020 audits, there were lots of changes and risks that arose from the pandemic. Whether, just employees working remotely, lots of changes in the internal control environment, and that plus the fact that there were lots of changes to the benefit plan regulations to accommodate the pandemic. So changes on, the approval process for benefit payments or the repayment terms for loans, and even just the threshold of which participants could take loans from the plan or how they could use certain benefits from the plan. So we spent time just evaluating the impact of that, specifically in this audit. So when we look at the evaluation of the key processes for the employee benefit plan, really broken down into 3 areas: the participant data, the benefit payments, and the compliance. And you'll see that we've got some improvements that we're going to recommend for the participant data and compliance areas. The first area just related to plan compliance and really spending time, and we've talked with management about spending time, to review the plan document and ensure that that there are policies in place to ensure that the school is in compliance with all of the provisions of the plan. And I know that, management has engaged or is working to engage legal counsel to assist with this, because a lot of this it's very highly regulated. So you do want to just make sure that the understanding of the plan document as written, that is how the plan is executed. The second area related to the census data. I talked a little bit about census data and how it's maintained and also the transfer of that data. There is a lot of manual transfer or documentation that takes place in your current environment. And I believe that there are ways to streamline that by integrating the payroll provider, which is ADP, with the record keeper of the plan, which is TIAA. And I think some of the human error can be just eliminated or at least minimized if you're able to, use manual automated reports across the 2 vendors. And I think it'll improve the timing of when participants are enrolled. It'll make sure that the compensation that's used is accurate in most instances. So that was just 2 recommendations that we really do believe will improve the overall internal control environment and compliance with the benefit plan. There are some other.
I have a quick question about that recommendation. Is that integration through their systems or software, or is that okay? All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, not a problem. There are some other updates that I've included here. I know it's a Saturday and you guys have a long agenda, so I won't go through them. I have walked through them at length with management, and I've also talked through them with the finance committee, just on things to be aware of, to ensure that those changes are implemented in years going forward based on changes. So if you guys are familiar with the CARES Act, there's also the Secure Act, some of the changes even in the required minimum distribution ages, et cetera. And then the last piece that I have is just included in here is the required communications. I did go over these with the finance committee, but again, we go through a process to make sure that we are independent of the school. The financial statements that are also included in the materials are the responsibility of management. They've identified someone who's taken responsibility. They've reviewed the financial statements, and they also believe that they're complete and accurate. We do provide some non-attest services that I'm required to make you aware of. We assist in the compilation of the financial statements, and to the extent that you would require bound copies, we would assist in that. And we also file the Form 990 and the Form 5500s as previously disclosed in the earlier slide. And going through those services, they are non-attest services, and we don't believe that those services impair our independence. So that's kind of the main thing or takeaway that I want to make sure that I communicate. Management takes responsibility for them. We just assist in some administrative work to ensure that those are properly filed where they need to be. And the last thing I just would leave you with is just the overall responsibility of fraud. Every one of us here plays a role in it, and just being able to mitigate fraud, and just that reminder that fraud could occur at any organization by any person at any time. And so when you look at, the role of management and having the good tools and control environment in place, I look at governance and the types of questions you ask, the materials you're receiving, and just your overall reinforcement of that tone at the top of the organization. And then as the internal auditor, our role, being to evaluate the sufficiency of those programs and tools that management and governance have put into place to go to minimize risk. I don't think you can ever fully eliminate it, but you can minimize the risk that fraud could occur. And that's really, all that I have. My contact information is included in the materials. I hope I didn't fly through the materials too quickly, but I do want to be respectful of time. I guess at this time, I'll turn it either back over to Hoyt or to Erica for next steps.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the presentation. Were there any questions for S&B?
I have a quick question. This is Adina. I'm Tiana, I'm just curious. I mean, it seems to me like this, like the kind of bottom line here is that this is a good audit, right? Like I'm just looking for like what the takeaway statement is on this audit.
Yep. I mean, it's hard to say because from a audit perspective, your goal or my goal is to assess whether or not the financial statements as prepared by management, that they are reasonably stated. That's my goal. So, it's not a fraud audit. Other than the major program that we look at on the financial statement, it's not necessarily a compliance audit. We do provide you with recommendations and observations as we're going through the process, just because, we want to make sure that you're doing that you have the tools or programs in place to actually produce a good set of financial statements that require minimal rework. We didn't have any audit adjustments other than, there's some things that are done for presentation purposes, reclasses, but, there weren't instances where we came in and, management had $1 million of receivables that weren't collected. And we said, we think you need to, have a reserve or to write those off, or that revenue recognition was inaccurate. So I think if you were to have a takeaway, I would go back to what I included on the results slide. And that's how I would, summarize that takeaway, that you received an unmodified opinion on the financial statements as well as for internal control over financial reporting and compliance. That's kind of what I would leave as the takeaway, and that there were no material weaknesses in the internal control environment. I know that was a long-winded answer.
Tiana, can you go over just the different categories of audit findings, like clean, unmodified? What are the other categories? Just
So for
comparison's sake. Yes.
For findings or for opinion types?
Opinion types.
So your opinion type would be unmodified or modified. And if I had a modified opinion, I would have to then tell you why. So one type of modified opinion could be a scope limitation, where maybe I was trying to review revenue, but management didn't provide me the information. So then I could not audit revenue. So then I would modify my opinion. Another one would be if I proposed the journal entry that I thought was material enough that it would misstate the financials, but management did not want to, did not agree, then I would modify my opinion and say, except for a particular accounting, the financial statements aren't misstated. When you look at the controls, you either, you have an effective control environment, an environment that needs improvement, or an environment that needs improvement. And then that ranking would be a control deficiency. So maybe if, we were looking at payroll and for 3 of 25, we couldn't get the right support. We would just, or the support was inaccurate. We'd say that's a control deficiency. The next level would be a significant deficiency. And that would be where a lack of controls were so egregious that were it not for the auditor, the mistake would have gone undetected. So where I've seen that a lot, procurement, where the bid process doesn't happen, or clients where bank recs are not performed and reviewed timely. A material weakness would be a combination of significant deficiencies. So if I had no procurement process, bank recs not reviewed, fixed assets don't reconcile to the general ledger, I would deem that a material weakness over financial reporting. Again, with the caveat that your financial statements would be incorrect had it not been for the independent review of the auditors. So that's kind of the hierarchy. And so it's unfortunate that when it's just a clean, unmodified opinion, that's just kind of all you say. Whereas you, when you start getting into the deficiencies, there is a lot of effort and language and communication that goes around to make sure that people can understand the nature of those deficiencies.
Tiana, and I'll piggyback on that a little bit as well, Adina. I think that what we want and what we've got, what we've received in the past is an unmodified audit. That is, and Tiana gave us the background on that. So that's what we want to look for when we get these audits, is an unmodified opinion. That means that we present all the information, they're satisfied with the information that we presented, and what they have audited is based off the information that they're satisfied with and they understand to be accurate. So that's a thumbs up, I would say. Tiana did mention some areas that we wanted to watch out for. One was the process for the credit cards. And based on our conversation with Bill and Erica yesterday, I believe they're going to get some a PTO. PTE, not PTO.
He is already on board.
Okay. I'm thinking about my own vacation time coming up. But, a part-time employee to help to assist with that. Second item that they did mention was the 403B, and that's an item that Bill is investigating and looking at. So that is an item where there may have been a little disconnect between with the little bit of the timing of some folks that were entered into the 403B, and a little bit of the baseline that we use to calculate that. So Bill is looking into that. They did a great job. I think S&B, this was the first year that we qualified for the audit, as was mentioned. And since S&B gave us a identified that there might be some area that's an area that we wanted to look at back in October, late September, early October. Bill has reached out to them due to an ERISA person, ERISA lawyer, to investigate a little further to help us understand that. And the school has notified the staff yesterday that this is an issue that we're looking into as well. So we're tracking that. Bill's tracking that. He's leading it. And going forward, Bill's going to update the finance committee on a monthly basis, and at minimum monthly basis, and he'll update the board regularly as well until it's brought to a resolution.
Yeah, thank
With
you,
that,
Hoyt,
yeah.
for sharing the additional questions, given that the finance committee got a little bit of a deep dive to give us some context.
Adina, did that answer your question? Crystal?
You did, thank you. Yeah, that was really helpful. Thanks.
All right. Does anybody else have questions for the auditor or for finance committee members? Well, Tiana, we thank you and your team for joining us and giving us that information today.
Thank you so much. Before I go, just because I don't get to see her as much as I used to, I want to say good morning, Ms. Moore.
Good morning, Ms. Nguyen, and I was going to jump in and tell you happy Thanksgiving. I hope
Happy
are you
Thanksgiving.
cooking again this year?
I am, and I'll send you some of the recipes that I'm going to use, and you do the same.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a blessed weekend.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're doing great on time. We're focused and conscientious. We can get through it. So the next agenda item is the State of the School report with our executive director, Bryant.
All right.
And I feel like I want to say it's a no bad news month.
Is but let us keep that trend going, please. We will continue going in the right direction. Good morning again, everyone. Everyone's able to see my screen? Thumbs up? Yes, good.
Yes.
So this morning, I wanted to kind of review, as we have for the past year and a half, where we are with COVID and the state of our response within the school community. Talk a little bit about an accreditation that we have coming up with the Middle States Association. Also talk about our 25-year review with the Public Charter School Board, and also celebrations associated with that momentous occasion. And then talk begin conversations about middle and high school planning and preparation. So, as you probably all know, Mayor Bowser had a vaccination mandate put in place for schools and child care centers that went into effect on the 1st of November. Basically, every adult who works in a school or a child care center in the District of Columbia must be vaccinated or have an approved waiver in place, and there are waivers available for health and medical reasons. Our final vaccination status at Stokes School, across campuses, 90% of our staff is currently fully vaccinated. We have a 91% rate at Brooklyn, 88% rate at East End. There are people on both campuses who have requested and received medical or religious waivers. We are required as a school to report this information to the Public Charter School Board, which we have done so earlier I think it was this week or last week. There has also been activity on the city level in terms of expanding virtual learning options for students in the district. DC City Council enacted legislation called Protecting Our Children Emergency Amendment Act of 2021. What this part of what this legislation does is to expand virtual learning options to students who are not eligible to be vaccinated. So because now 5 through 11-year-olds are eligible, they don't fall into this category. It's only our pre-K 3 and 4-year-old students who could potentially be eligible for this particular virtual learning option. This, if you recall, initially at the beginning of the school year, the only students who were eligible to learn virtually were students who had medical conditions that required them to stay at home. Now, if parents of 3 and 4-year-olds want to have distance learning as an option, they can get a medical licensed physician or a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant to recommend that a child stay home for medical reasons. Also, there's availability for virtual learning options for students, young students who have household members with medical conditions that could put them at high risk of illness if they contract COVID. So now, again, that our 5 through 11-year-olds are getting vaccinated, they will not be eligible for this waiver or for this virtual learning option. We do have a couple of families across campuses who have expressed interest in pursuing this option, and so we are working with those families to find solutions. One of the biggest things, in my opinion, that has happened in the last couple of months to assist our staff and our entire school community in managing this COVID process is the fact that we have hired Privia Health, which is a medical group that is, it works across the country. They have both in-person services and virtual services, but we have contracted with them to take over our COVID response protocols and procedures. This has lifted a tremendous burden off of us, particularly our operations staff, because the process of testing everyone, students and staff, on a weekly basis on campus, the process of tracking any positive cases, communicating with families about positive cases, contact tracing when students would be eligible to come back to school if they had contracted COVID or if they were quarantining because they were a close contact. That, you can imagine, was an arduous task for a group of educators, right? We were doing public health work, but now that we have hired Privia, they have taken over. They are offering clinical assessment to students and staff. They are monitoring our COVID test results. They are notifying families or staff of positive test results. They are tracing our close contacts, anyone who could have come in contact with someone who has been identified as positive. They are providing instructions to families and staff on quarantining and what period of time they can return to school. And Privia has also held a couple of town hall meetings with our staff and with our families to talk to them about our services. And this has been, I think we began our contract at the start of October. So we're about 6 weeks into the process now. It's starting to settle down. Again, it's taken a huge burden off of our shoulders, and we are extremely grateful to have this partnership. When we entered this partnership, it is an expensive endeavor, And when we entered the partnership, we did it not knowing necessarily where the funds would come from to support the contract. However, shortly after this, we signed this contract, there was a grant opportunity that became available through the Office of the State Superintendent of Education. And it was a grant specifically for clinical support of COVID response in schools. So I applied for the grant. The grant was approved earlier last week, and the funds from that grant will cover our contract with Privia. So it has worked out. Next, we have, as COVID positivity rates have subsided, as community spread has lowered in the District of Columbia, there are people in our community who have asked when we would start to relax some of our protocols, because they are we have some very strict protocols, but our strict protocols have kept us from having any major outbreaks of COVID within the building. We actually had a 3-week stretch where we had no positive cases, and actually there were no positive cases this week as well. So we attribute this to all of these, very, very strict protocols of daily health screening, social distancing, wearing our masks all the time, maintaining our students within their cohorts, again, testing almost everybody within the building, limiting the number of people who come in and out of our building as in visitors. We are going to consider relaxing some of these protocols. We've been in consultation with Privia about this. We are going to wait until after the winter break when people have traveled. We'll see if there are any surges in COVID rates, but after the break, then we will consider possibly relaxing some of these. And what we're looking at specifically is the frequency and the percentage of people being tested within the staff and the student body, and also taking some of the COVID mitigation structures that we have in place in the classroom. For example, we have shields up. We don't have a lot of extra furniture or books or anything. It's just tables and desks. And so it's not ideal learning conditions. And it is challenging for our teachers and instructional staff, but it's a balance that we've had to try to find in this, whole dance between keeping our students safe and having ideal learning conditions. So we might start reintroducing some things into the classroom, for example, books and manipulatives for students to share. If we have if it looks like COVID, the positivity rates will continue to decline, we would like to, at the same time, ramp up some of our old instructional, processes and techniques and get back to a more normal state within the classroom. Do I have any questions about any of this so far?
Do you have any more information about COVID, or is this the last slide?
One more, and this is about thank you for, this is about the fact that at Brooklyn, if you recall, we decided to lease a couple of modular buildings to expand classroom space on the Brooklyn campus. The delivery of these modular units was delayed a bit, but they have finally arrived. They are installed in the lower parking lot of our Brooklyn campus. They're wired up for internet and electricity. Now it's just a matter of getting final sign-off from DCRA to get the electricity connected. We're hoping to be able to move students into the buildings after we return for the Thanksgiving break. So we're excited about that. We're excited about being able to, stretch out a little bit and hopefully we will make it through the end of. I will say that although staff is still very stressed, this is difficult work of educating children in a pandemic. Staff have been burning candles on both ends for the last year and a half, and particularly our operations staff has been burning candles on both ends and in the middle, and so people are almost burned out. But we are at the point now where I can kind of see some light at the end of the tunnel. I can see a path to the end of the school year. At the beginning of the school year, that was not the case. Heather can tell you that I called her and said, I'm not sure how we're going to make it. But I do feel like things have started to settle down considerably. We have many of the supports in place that we need, and staff is working really, really hard. Fortunately, we have some breaks coming up with the Thanksgiving break and the winter break. And my hope is that when we return from the winter break, when more of our students are vaccinated, when COVID rates continue to decline, that we can have more of a normal looking school day and school year. And Adina, you had a question.
Yes, I have a question and then a really brief comment. The question is to your last point about students getting vaccinated. In the same way that you're able to share what the percentage of vaccination rate is for staff, will you be able to at some point, like, I have no idea, like, what type of privacy laws are in place. Will you be able to share at some point what percentage of kids on both campuses are vaccinated, say by the beginning of the year?
By the beginning of the year,
I just picked that time. It's an arbitrary date, but I mean, I'm just thinking about how the vaccines just became available, and I know it's already tough to get appointments. Blah, blah,
blah. I do not know the answer to that question, Adina. I think that we can easily, we've been doing surveys throughout the pandemic of our families, and we have asked questions on some of those surveys about the number of families that have been vaccinated. We could probably do an anonymous survey and check the vaccination rates for children as well. And I think that we could share that out, since we would be reporting out in the aggregate. So we can make that a goal. We can try the beginning of the year, or, think about, I think we need to think about the timing of that, because I think that there are likely a lot of families. There are some families that rushed out and got their children vaccinated right away. There are other families that are waiting, to see. And so I think I'd like to give enough time for those families who are waiting to see and ultimately decide to get their children vaccinated. So maybe we could look at the end of January or into February for reporting out.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's helpful. I mean, and just for context, I mean, because you were talking about, you all considering loosening some of the mitigation strategy, it seems like that might be a data point that could help support the loosening of some of those mitigation strategies.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're able to share it. And then just really quickly, and I've said this in the email exchanges among the board, but again, like, I feel like I have a vantage point where I've been able to hear stories from schools across the city, and always just continue to hope that all children across the district are able to be educated in the safest environment possible. But what I will say is that what leadership, what the Stokes leadership, administrative leadership and staff have done is just really amazing. Keeping our kids and our families and their school communities for both campuses as safe as you have in the past few months. Your leadership in securing separate contracts with Privia, the nimbleness, the building of the modular classrooms, the making space for outdoor, eating and learn. I mean, it's just, I just want to say that it just really is amazing what you all have done with the resources that you've had. And I just want to acknowledge that, and again, like I wish that were the case for all kids across the district. But I, in particular, as a parent, am just very, very thankful that our son goes to a school that has the type of leadership that we have at Stokes, because I know these decisions are not easy. Many of them are costly. As you've mentioned, staff has been burned out. I mean, but what you all have done is just truly amazing. So thank you so much.
I agree. I would definitely wholeheartedly support that statement.
Thank you so much for that. I am biased, but we have the most amazing group of educators on staff in the entire country, in my opinion. They have, talk about going above and beyond. They have gone above and beyond the call of duty. Nobody signed up for educating children during a pandemic, but if we had to do it, I don't think I would want to do it with any other group of people, because they are caring, they are compassionate, they are hardworking, and they are dedicated to the school and the kids. And it's not easy, but it really is a pleasure to be able to these are our children. I say all the time that we have them most of the day, and so they are our children as well. And we just wanted to ensure that our children and our school community have the best possible chance of staying healthy during this period of time, and also providing, support to staff and families as we kind of struggle through together. I see two people with their hands raised, and I think Ms. Galladay was first.
I think Janice was first.
Okay.
Thank you, and this is really quick. In the past, the board has offered letters of support and other ways of celebrating the work of the staff and faculty, especially through this difficult time. So I would urge us offline from here to figure out what we're going to do in this Thanksgiving period to celebrate the hard work of the staff and faculty. So that was just my only point.
Thank you.
And then for me, as a parent, I will say it has been providing me as well as other families with peace of mind that we do the 100% testing. I've talked to other parents at the other schools and they don't have that. So they're walking around with the unknown. And that's 100% testing weekly. I did experience the contact with somebody in the class in regards to my prince experiencing contact. And it's a scary experience getting that call like, oh, you have to come pick up your child. Granted, he was negative for all tests and everything was fine with him doing the virtual and stuff like that. And this was when Privia started, so there was a little bit of bumps in the road, but they are a great addition. And I do want to acknowledge the lead nurse. I believe his name is Chris.
Yes.
That was available to answer the questions that I had, and some that he didn't even know the answers to. He was able to get back to me for the answers, and as well as the campus director, Mr. Kareem. He was open to the feedback that I provided, which was the class didn't know. Like before, we were letting classes know. And when it was some students were virtual and some students were in class, parents were like, well, what is going on? So hopefully that is fixed if there are cases. I know, knock on wood, there was no cases this week, and we are having that trend frequently. And I also wanted to thank Ms. Nancy from the East End campus, as well as our teachers, because they were very supportive and responsive from getting a call on a Friday. So thank you to the school, thank you to the staff, and just going through the experience. I just wanted to let parents know that there's a process in place and it's continually being improved, and we're going to get through this together.
Thank you, Ms. Galladay. Any other questions on this section? Well,
I did have one thing. So with students getting vaccinations now, how do you want them to present it if they are vaccinated? Is it like as they get their card filled out with the 2 shots? Do they
we have not gotten any guidance on that from either the Public Charter School Board or the State Superintendent of Education's office. I am not sure if we should be, so we go through an annual process of collecting health information, which includes immunization. I don't know if it will be included in that process, if there is some other process that needs to be put in place for us to collect it. What I can commit to is to collect information anonymously now, or sometime within the next couple of months, and then if and when we get guidance on how we should be collecting it from students, then we can put that process in place. But I don't know now.
But but doesn't that impact if they are in contact with someone, if they have to quarantine or not?
It does. Okay. It does. And the Privia Health nurse that you mentioned earlier and his team would be the team that would determine when they either get positive results from testing, or when they reach out to families to do the process of contact tracing. It is at that point that that team of medical professionals will ask if a child has been vaccinated or not.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, there we go. Yes. I am absolutely delighted to be talking about something other than COVID. That topic is, well, I'm not delighted about a recreditation visit, but I am excited to be talking about something other than COVID. It is an indication that we are kind of looking toward the future now rather than being stuck in the moment. And so some of you may know that in addition to being an IB authorized school, we are accredited by the Middle States Association. Middle States does a reaccreditation, goes through a reaccreditation process with its schools every 10 years. And we are now up for reaccreditation. We started a group of teams within the school, teams of staff, instructional staff, operational staff, finance, have been working on completing a self-study document over the last year that evaluates all different aspects of our school programming. This team was led by Pilar Lynch. She was our program coordinator. You may remember that she previously served as the Director of Teaching and Learning at the East End campus. We completed the self-study document and submitted it to Middle States Association in October. We are going to host on Monday a visit from the team chairperson. Normally these visits are in-person visits, and a team of 4 or 5 people will actually come to the school, walk around, meet with people face to face, look at documents. But because of COVID, only the team chairperson comes out to the school and has a 1-day visit. That day will be on next Monday. The team chair is going to visit both campuses and meet with school leadership and staff and review some documentation that we will make available to him. Then later on, at the end of November, beginning of December, we will have a full team visit. It will be a virtual visit, a 3-day visit, where the full review team will meet with more staff, parents, students, and meet also with the board chair to kind of discuss the state of our school and any questions that the review team may have. because we at Stokes School are always looking to improve what we do, we have also applied for, through the Middle States Association, an early childhood program of distinction. This is basically an accolade or acknowledgement that one of our programs is exceptional. We have presented an application for this early childhood program of distinction, focusing on our language immersion program for early childhood. We will host a one-day visit from a team member in mid-December to complete the process of this early childhood program of distinction. Any questions on Middle States in either of these reviews? Okay. So we will.
Quick question for you, Erica. What was the enrollment? I mean, the wait list count. What was the wait list count for this? Do you remember the range for the school year?
I actually don't know it off of the top of my head, but I got an email yesterday about it. Let me see if I can pull it up really quickly. Okay. Okay, so for 2021, this looks like this is Brooklyn. Okay, at Brooklyn, it looks like we have a waiting list this year of a little over 1,000. At East End, let's see. I'm looking at an Excel spreadsheet on my phone. So at East End, the waiting list is, it looks like around 500.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? All right. Also, forward-looking, this year we start the process of our 25-year review with the Public Charter School Board. Every 5 years, PCSB has some kind of review process in place, whether it's looking at our academic program or some other aspect of school. And then every 10 years, we go through a charter renewal process. So in, let's see, this spring, although this is our 23rd year, this spring, we're gonna start one of the processes that kicks off our 25-year renewal. And it will be with a qualitative site review from PCSB. It will include, it's a similar kind of process where people will come out to the school and make unannounced observations of classrooms. There's a layer of complication here because, you know, we have these protocols in place, COVID protocols, where people will need to submit negative PCR test results and so forth before they come to the school, but they will adhere to our COVID protocols, make unannounced visits to schools, take a look at classes, review student work in English language arts and math. And they will also debrief with the school leadership and staff about the process. The qualitative site review team will produce a report with an assessment for each of our campuses instructional programs. It should be ready about 3 months after the initial visit, and they will report it out to school leaders. PCSB will report that out to school leadership and staff about 3 months after the visit again. And then looking forward, school year 23-24 will be our 25th year celebration as a school community. We have begun to talk about planning and celebration for that particular milestone. It's something that I'm very much looking forward to, and also getting board and school community support for that planning process. Any questions about that or a comment?
You know, it'd be interesting. That might be a really good opportunity to revisit our during the 25th year celebration. That might be a really good opportunity to revisit our strategic plan prior to that, and just focus in on the milestones that we've talked about for that period of time. And that might be that might provide a baseline of really good momentum to put forth some of our strategic planning initiatives.
Wait,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, big anniversaries are also great times to raise money.
Yeah,
because they raise people's excitement level and your profile.
I think that's wonderful. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think our current strategic plan, if my memory serves me, our last year of that strategic plan will coincide with our 25th anniversary. So time to start new strategic planning.
Yeah, and making sure that we have realized our current goals for our current strategic plan.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Maybe that's an item. Maybe that's an item we can review it in our next board meeting. Just the strategic plan and follow up on the status of things.
Absolutely. Did someone else have a question or a comment?
Eric, I was just going to add that maybe we could reach out and submit a proposal to Compass because they helped us with the last strategic plan.
So noted. Okay. Then finally, when we started planning, before we even opened the Easton campus, as we were planning for our Easton campus, one of the things that we knew we needed to do and started talking about was plan potentially for a middle school that would extend into high school, because we knew that we would have more students who would need middle and high school options, particularly in a language immersion track. We got a little sidetracked by our middle school planning because of several things, including COVID, but we're refocusing now because time is of the essence. We are planning to submit an application to the DC Public Charter School Board, if approved by the board, planning to submit an application to request a charter amendment that would allow us to expand the grades that we serve at Stokes School and to increase our enrollment ceiling. That would be next year. This year would be planning, and I've asked Janice View, as the chair of the Academic Excellence Committee, if she could just lead us in a conversation, kind of just recapping the thinking process behind starting a middle school, the timeline, the parties involved. So I'll turn it over to Janice now, unless someone else has another question for me.
And may I share, may you share the screen so I can?
Yes,
Thank
let me, this is the, okay, let's see if I can do it. I'm sure I can. Okay, let's see here. Let me stop sharing.
Hang on one second and let me even find the document. Give me 1 second to do that. Okay. Oh, there it is. Can you see that? Did I do that or did you do that, Erica?
I shared it.
Oh, thank you.
Do you want?
No. I was trying to do it on my screen, but this is better. Great. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So the Academic Excellence Committee has not had a chance to meet to discuss this, but I did share the PowerPoint in advance of this meeting, so they knew that it was coming. And next slide, please. This is the question of why expand. And I think Erica addressed some of that a few minutes ago. But what we do know is that by the school year 24-25, DC International's middle school will not be able to accommodate all of the graduates from its member schools. And we also know that a few years ago, the member schools talked about a fair and equitable process of admission to DCI when DCI can no longer accommodate all the graduating fifth graders. So that exists, but at the same time, Stokes is really interested in this process of creating a middle school that's closer to the East End campus because there's a need in Ward 7 and 8 for this kind of language immersion process. And so anticipating that DCI can't accommodate all of our graduating students and knowing that even for those that maybe want to go to DCI, they might not be able to, we think that it's time to look at the possibility of this kind of expansion. So next slide, please. So we also understand that there are a growing number of language immersion schools that are near the East End campus. And so Houston Elementary is one of them. And they will also have graduating fifth graders as of the academic year 23-24. And so if the Stokes board were to approve this expansion, one of the things that would happen is that the staff would start to build even more partnerships with these other schools, with community organizations, civic associations, and so forth to determine the location of such a school. And it would be a space that would kind of accommodate middle and high school that would serve the entire community and be, sort of a collective process for doing it, not just Stokes barging in saying, this is what you need, right? And so the curriculum would be an expansion of what we already do. Language immersion, social justice, community service and wellness. Because it's middle school and high school, there's an opportunity to expand the food, nutrition, and environmental stewardship programs in ways that kids are really doing much more hands-on at work and community service work in this area. The International Baccalaureate program would continue. And for the high school piece, expand to the diploma program and the career-related program as well. So it's new territory for us, but it's an expansion of what we kind of already know. So the timeline, assuming that the board makes this approval, would be this year, starting some conversations with people in the community, starting to do some research, and beginning the application prep process. Next year, submit an application to the Public Charter School Board, sort of simultaneously starting to look at appropriate locations and facilities, and then opening the campus in the 24-25 school year for middle school. And it would then grow into the high school. I don't think there's a slide after that, is there? Oh, next steps, right. We are presenting the idea now for the board to mull and for us to have a discussion today to talk about the pros and cons. But we would expect to have a board vote by the January meeting because we then need to start the application process. There would be a meeting with the Public Charter School Board with the Stokes board and staff. And then the staff would begin to create a summary document for both the board and potential funders for this new venture. I think that's the last slide, right?
Yes.
So discussion. how does this strike people? What are concerns that people have? What are the things that might make us say no to this? Because we think we have all the reasons for saying yes. So Tracy.
Thank you for your presentation, Janice. And this is something that, we have talked about in the past, and we were integral in the planning of DCI and that process. And so we know that there's an extraordinary need for a middle school and eventually a high school, especially one that can continue the curriculum and social justice aspects of what we're doing right now on both campuses. The biggest challenge that I'd like to hear more about is the funding and what's the budget for this project. Do we have any preliminary information around what it may cost? Because we're going to need some of that financial information before we can vote on moving forward with significant costs. If the vote is going to be instead articulated as one of, we want to look into this as a possibility, that of course requires a little less information up front. However, I'd love to hear more about the financial implications of this.
Yes, absolutely, Tracy. And I don't know if Erica has some thoughts about that.
So I agree. Tracy, we have not pulled that information together yet, but as part of the preparation process, our plan is to, I don't know if you recall that when we were preparing for the East End campus, there was a few people from our leadership staff who participated in Bellwether Education Strategic Growth Institute. And during that period, we prepared documents similar to what you're describing, financial documents, also pulled together research about the need for the type of program that we were proposing to take to that particular community, projections for enrollment, just a summary document of everything that would respond to questions that you or others would ask about that process. And so we haven't had a chance to pull that together yet, but we have a format and a template all ready to go because we've done it before. And we plan to do that as we prepare.
I'd like to.
Thanks, Erica.
Well,
I'd
hang
like
on,
to
wait, hang on one second. I think Crystal had her hand up next.
Yes, I did. So as a parent at the East End campus, I have been speaking with the different parents, and there is a huge interest in having a middle and high school, especially with our third graders quickly approaching. And there's also people who want to roll up their sleeves and help out as well. So I know myself, I already expressed interest, as well as I believe Hoyt may be expressing his interest, and I know other people are on the board. There is external help as well. And with the financial aspect, I feel like as we found funding for other things, we'll find funding for this. It's just a matter of rolling up our sleeves and making it happen. So I'm vocally like letting you know now that I'm a big proponent of expanding, and I'm willing to roll up my sleeves to help out with that.
Thank you for that, Ms. Galladay. I will say about the funding that I think that the relationships that we have established over the course of the last several years with different organizations that helped to fund the East End campus, those relationships will be beneficial going into this middle school process. I have had some preliminary conversations with particularly people at the Charter School Growth Fund. They provided us a substantial grant to open the East End campus. I think that there would be interest in supporting this project as well. We just haven't gotten to the point as an organization where we've submitted a formal application for request for funds. But I think that would be a source of some additional funding. I also know that there is federal funding available that we tapped into opening the Easton campus, that we would probably be eligible to apply for in opening a middle high school as well. So I don't have numbers, but I do know where some sources, some major sources of funding could come from. And then we also have our wonderful board chair, who is a fundraiser and a wonderful source of information just about what strategies we should use to tap into different sources. And our development committee.
I see Hoyt's hand and then Adina. I think you were next after Hoyt.
Erica, how much of the middle school and high school program have you all had an opportunity to document?
Can you, I'm not sure I understand the question. How much of the middle high school program that we are planning?
As if you're planning for this, yeah. Have you had an opportunity to put down on paper?
I have some very rough concept papers that I've put together, but
Okay.
nothing that's ready for public consumption.
Okay.
And Adina?
So my question is very similar to Hoyt's question, but I understand that that might be something that's a little bit further down the field. But I do, just in the conversations that I've been a part of, or these meetings, it sounds like the driving reason is because of attendance capacity at DCI. So, you know, hopefully, and Eric, you basically just answered that question, it would be good to eventually start to see like some of the concepts, some of the concept documents to kind of show, you know, how this particular school would what's the word I'm looking for? How this particular school will kind of stand on its own, what type of like innovative and new concepts would be a part of this school. You know, I'm sure that you all are taking a look at like the positives and the deltas at DCI and kind of incorporate and letting that inform some of the kind of programmatic and curriculum concept stuff that you're thinking of. But that was basically my question, very similar to Hoyt's, is just look forward to hearing when the time is right, a little bit more concept.
Well, go ahead, Hoyt.
No, go ahead. I just jump in. I don't raise my hand like I should.
Well, I was just going to say that it is really just now that we're at the point where we can refocus on this particular project, where we have the bandwidth. I also have support from Pilar, and I have this on our to-do list. Starting after the Middle States accreditation review, this is the next thing that we're going to dive into. So I hope to have on the timeline that Janice presented, the goal is to have some summary documentation to the board for the January board meeting, so we can share out then, if not before. Probably then, probably not before.
And then Heather, I see your hand up.
Do you want to go ahead and have your follow-up?
Do I want to have my follow-up?
Hoyt. I was asking Hoyt.
Yeah, I like the January time frame because I always like a more aggressive ones, time frames, especially when there's a big, pretty big project due. It may be a little aggressive for the January timeframe. I think we might want to consider that. I think that, I mean, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but from doing some of this, like from exploring middle high schools in a previous life in terms of starting from a charter school perspective, there's a level of programmatic detail that that you don't have on the K through even the K through 8 school, or K through or elementary school, I should say, that that needs a little that needs to kind of be ferreted out via a pretty comprehensive programmatic design, because the cost in that can be pretty significant. So I think that's a January 2022 is a good target date. But given the stuff that we do have kind of on our plate, with the reviews coming up, us just hopefully seeing the tail end of COVID, we may want to just be a little, open ourselves up to be flexible about that January 22 date.
I appreciate that, Hoyt. What I'd like to commit to is bringing something to the January 22 meeting, some kind of summary document, even if it's a high level, just with additional details from what we provided today.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the frame doesn't have to be a final approval, but an exploration maybe. I'm not sure in terms of what I'm hearing from trustees, but I think the main thing is that it sounds like there's a lot of enthusiasm for exploring the idea and really starting to see the contours of what a plan would be, both curricularly as well as financially. I mean, one thing that I just want to raise in discussion, and I'll say at the outset that I'm supportive of moving forward in this way, but I do think there are like local politics to keep in mind around the growth of charter school sector and additional schools and campuses. And what is now, I think, like sometimes characterized as like a literal battle for student seats and that kind of thing. So like at this point, if the city has 50% of kids in charters and 50% in traditional districts, it is a race. It is a much tighter competition for kids and seats. And that means, what is the compelling vision for adding another campus? Like I believe we have far too many schools in this district right now for the number of kids that we have. That's independent of quality. So keep it real. Like, I think that's true. But I also think like there will be significant pushback. If you all watched the approvals for most recent charter applications, they were far more contentious than in years past. Some of it was driven by the fact that we were in the middle of a pandemic, but I think there are like political wins that we really need to think about. I think that when I've heard Ms. Bryant talk about this, that she is solidly focused on the needs of the neighboring community. So that, there could be some hybrid options or some open enrollment options that I think we should seriously consider, so that we are preparing for that part of a discussion on approval. So I just want to sort of put all of that out there as well. But I'm mostly excited that we would have a middle high school option, and that is deeply committed to the mission of the school. And I think that's a net good in the world.
Yeah, thank you, Heather, for that caution. Much appreciated. And Crystal, I think you have your hand up.
I think you make a valid point with the number of the schools. However, I know that there are language immersion schools that have expanded, and with maybe we can think about partnering with them in some capacity to make this a reality, because as the feeder school, which is DCI for language immersion schools, they can't hold everyone, and nor do everyone want to travel to that part of town. So we need to join forces pretty much to make it happen, because it's a lot of things can happen when you have the numbers to support you and the people.
So thank you for that, Ms. Galladay. A few people on staff, particularly Mr. Kareem Ewing Boyd, and I have been in touch with staff and leadership at some of those other language immersion schools in the area to start these preliminary conversations about possible partnerships. And I think that there is interest, and it would be a really interesting model for us to pursue. So we're excited about doing that.
That's all I've got. So, yeah.
Is there any other discussion from board members? Other questions or important points that you want to get on the table?
Please let me know the best time to talk about a prior topic that was talked about with this report. I don't know if it's now or later.
On Ms. Bryant or just about the academic committee?
No, it's not for the academic committee. It's about the COVID stuff. I'm reading parent conversations via our parent square and stuff, and I want to make sure that their voice is heard as well.
Okay.
So let me.
It feels like we're wrapping up. I don't see anybody who wants to say more on the expansion. So this would be the time, Ms. Kelly.
Okay, so there are two parent comments. One said, what is meant by relaxed standards being considered after this Thanksgiving holiday? Does this mean more students intermingling or reduced mask wearing or some other measures? We did hear Director Bryant mention books and manipulative. Thank you. So that's the first one.
So what is meant about relaxing standards is revisiting, as I mentioned before, revisiting the frequency and percentage of testing of staff and students, because CDC and DC Health do not necessarily recommend testing at the level and frequency that we do. Across the city, they're testing in DC public schools and many public charter schools at 20%. We are closer to 100%. We have gotten feedback from OSSI and DC Health that is a very high level and not necessary given the level of vaccination that we have in the school community. But this is something, again, that after the winter break, when we come back, after we can determine if there's going to be a surge or not, we might look at reducing the level of the number of people who are being tested. So that's one relaxing of standards. We will not relax the masking standard. This is actually a city requirement, right? So it's a DC government requirement that we wear masks inside the school and inside buildings. So we're not going to relax that until and unless the city relaxes it. The other thing that as you mentioned, we will consider relaxing some of the kind of configurations within the classroom that will make it easier for children to work together, make it easier for them to access instructional materials and supplies, potentially sharing some of those materials and supplies. If our medical consultants, in consultation with them, if they say this is something that they think is okay to do, then we'll start bringing some of those things back into the classroom. We will not relax the cohorting of students until we are told to do otherwise. We will not relax the meal protocol, either having half the class eat at a time or eating outside unless we are told to do otherwise. We will not relax we could potentially relax the health screening that we have to go through every day. That's another place that we could cut back on, but we will see when we get there.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. And this same two parents who have multiple kids at the school want to say they're glad that Stokes has kept the stringent COVID protocols in place, which has greatly aided in our numbers. They would like to advocate for those same or similar measures to continue, which has kept our transmissions rate at or near zero until the students' vaccination rates are similar to the staff vaccination numbers.
So noted. We are also in consultation with a group of medical professionals who are kind of guiding us through this process. So we will not make any decisions without input from people who know better than us.
Got it. And one more comment, because I like to let you guys know what's happening from the parent perspective. Another parent said, Heather, you raised some good points about the political implications. So I think it is good that you're raising it now so that we can formulate our response in our presentation so that we can address it before they even bring it up. So thank you. And that concludes what I had to say in regards to parents right now.
Thank you, Ms. Galladay, for monitoring the YouTube, the public meetings part. We really appreciate that. Okay.
Ms. Bryant, I'm assuming that in the column of what you're not, what you will not loosen, what you're not going to do, that also includes the visitation mitigation, right? Like parents in the building.
We really, so not unless somebody tells us it's okay to do. No, we that is one of the things that, you know, minimizing the number of people coming in and out of the building minimizes the chances that other things can come in and out of the building, like flu or COVID or something like that. So if no, not inclined to do it, but if the situation with COVID spread, you know, continues to improve, obviously at some point we will relax that, but that's not at the top of the list right now.
Okay. I'll just continue to rely on my 6-year-old's less than accurate map out of his school building.
But what we are doing, Adina, especially for prospective parents, which this has been kind of a challenge if, you know, applying to a school that you've never been inside. We are doing some video tours of the school with prospective parents. We'll also be having very small groups, potentially, of parents come in on the weekend. You know, they'll have to go through prospective parents and potentially current parents, but they'd have to go through the same protocols of submitting the negative PCR test and being vaccinated and all of that. But we do understand the importance of families being able to see what the school looks like. It's always better to see the school in action with children there, because that is our purpose. But we are trying to find ways to make it accommodations so that at least for parents who have not seen the inside of the school, you know, parents of pre-K students who started last year, making some plans to find ways to get them into the buildings or see what's, you know, what a day in the life of a Stokes School student actually looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Where we are in the agenda, let me make sure I'm following it. Yes. Thank you, Janice, and Academic Excellence Committee report for that. We are going to move into closed session for a training opportunity for trustees with our partners at the Education Board Partners Organization. Let's take can we take like a 3-minute bio break?
I will stop.